The sound came first, sharp, clean, humiliating. The slap cracked through the air like a whip, slicing through the string quartet's melody. For a second, even the chandelier seemed to stop trembling. Eleanor Wells stood frozen in the middle of the Willow Creek ballroom, one hand pressed to her burning cheek, her glasses lying shattered across the marble floor. 130 guests stared, trapped between disbelief and voyeuristic thrill. The bride, Savannah Blake, radiant in lace and malice, lowered her hand with the grace of someone convinced she'd done something righteous. "That's what you get for being so selfish," she hissed, her voice steady through the microphone clipped to her veil. "A woman your age doesn't need that much space. Michael and I will take the apartment. You can stay with friends, can't you?" Laughter, nervous, fragmented, rippled through the crowd before dying in the heavy air. Michael Wells, Eleanor's only son, stood beside his new wife, eyes on the floor, jaw locked. He didn't move. He didn't speak. The silence that followed was a living thing, crawling up Eleanor's spine. She bent down slowly, gathered the broken pieces of her glasses with trembling fingers, and slipped them into her purse. "Savannah," she said softly, her voice trembling but clear, "you've made your point." She turned toward the exit. The sound of her heels echoed across the marble floor like a slow, deliberate countdown. Nobody dared stop her. Behind her, the laughter, the music, and the applause resumed, desperate to bury what had just happened under noise and champagne. Outside, the night air struck cold and merciful. Eleanor stood beneath the parking lot lights, her reflection blurred on the hood of her old sedan. The pain on her cheek had already dulled. What remained was something deeper, a hollow ache spreading through the years she had spent being polite, quiet, agreeable. She reached into her purse, found her phone, and dialed a number she hadn't used in months. Daniel Carter. Eleanor. The voice on the other end was calm, composed, the tone of a man who dealt in crises without panic. "I need you to come to Willow Creek. Bring the documents, the ones we talked about." There was a pause. "Are you sure, Eleanor? Once we start, there's no turning back." "I've never been more sure." She ended the call and leaned against the car, watching her breath fog in the air. Inside the ballroom, Savannah's laugh rose above the music, a bright, false chime that carried through the glass doors. It was the same laugh that had once fooled everyone, even Eleanor's son. She remembered the first time Savannah had visited her modest Lakeview apartment 2 years earlier. The girl had looked around with an indulgent smile, eyes flicking from the second-hand couch to the kitchen tiles. "Oh, it's so cozy," she had said, dragging out the word like it was an apology. Every visit since had been an exercise in endurance. The comments about Eleanor's outdated wardrobe, her ancient car, her part-time job at the flower shop. Each remark had been a thread in a web, spun with sugar and contempt. And Michael, her Michael, had changed too. The boy who used to call her every Sunday now parroted Savannah's words about downsizing, about safety, about moving somewhere more appropriate. Love had become obedience, and obedience had turned into betrayal. Eleanor tightened her coat against the wind. A message buzzed on her phone. It was from Mr. Howard, her elderly neighbor from Lakeview. "Eleanor, that young lady brought a man to your balcony last week. He was taking measurements. I didn't like it, so I shouted at them. They left fast." Eleanor closed her eyes. Proof. Savannah's ambition wasn't new. It had just found a new stage tonight. 30 minutes, she thought. 30 minutes until Daniel arrived. 30 minutes until silence broke. Inside, the music swelled again. A love song for a couple who had just buried their conscience under designer lace. Eleanor straightened her back, brushed invisible dust from her sleeve, and looked at the ballroom one last time. "You wanted space, Savannah," she murmured to herself, the corner of her mouth curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. You're about to get all the space you asked for." She slid into her car, started the engine, and watched the grand ballroom shimmer in her rearview mirror like a mirage. Then she whispered, almost tenderly, 30 minutes. And with that, she drove toward the edge of her old life, leaving the music, the lights, and the humiliation behind, carrying only resolve in their place. Savannah Blake never needed to shout to poison a room. She did it with smiles. Her words dripped like honey over glass, sweet enough to blind, smooth enough to cut. 3 months before the wedding, she orchestrated what she called a family discussion. It wasn't a discussion, it was an ambush. Eleanor Wells opened her Lakeview apartment door that Sunday afternoon to find not only her son, Michael, and his fiancée, but also Savannah's parents, 2 polished strangers wearing matching expressions of superiority. "Mrs. Wells," said Mr. Blake, adjusting his gold cufflinks, "we're here to talk about your future." "My future," Eleanor repeated, already feeling the walls close in. "Yes," Savannah's mother chimed in smoothly. "At your age, living alone in such a large apartment can be risky. We found a lovely retirement residence in Brookstone. Full services, nurses, community. You'd love it there." Michael sat beside his bride-to-be, hands clasped, nodding like an obedient student. Eleanor studied his face, searching for the boy who used to defend her when neighbors complained about his baseballs breaking their windows. That boy wasn't here anymore. What sat across from her was a man trained to agree. Savannah crossed her legs elegantly. "It's not just about safety, Eleanor. It's about peace of mind, for all of us. You've worked so hard. Don't you think you deserve some rest?" Eleanor's lips curved faintly. "And my apartment?" Savannah's eyes flickered. Just a second, but it was enough. "Well," she said with an innocent shrug, "it's a great location. Perfect for starting our family." And there it was, the dagger hidden in velvet. That night after they left, Eleanor sat alone at her kitchen table, the air thick with the scent of lavender tea she couldn't bring herself to drink. She opened her old leather folder, bank papers, investment accounts, deeds, evidence of a fortune no one suspected. Her late husband, Robert's voice echoed in her memory. "Visible wealth attracts predators. Hide the gold in plain sight." She had followed that advice religiously. For years, she'd lived modestly, pretending to be an aging widow on a fixed income. What Savannah and Michael didn't know was that every work bonus he'd received, every rent discount they bragged about, had quietly come from her accounts. Eleanor had been financing their illusion for years. The next morning, she called Amelia Grant, an old friend who worked in real estate. "Find out everything you can about Michael and Savannah," she said. "Debts, loans, evictions, everything." Amelia didn't disappoint. The report arrived 48 hours later, printed and bound in red. Eleanor read in silence. Over $120,000 in credit card debt, 3 months behind on rent, 2 luxury cars financed beyond their means. Even the wedding was built on borrowed money. They were drowning, and she had been their life raft. Then came the detail that stopped her breath. Recent calls from Michael to banks asking about power of attorney for elderly dependents. Her own son had been inquiring how to gain legal control of her finances. For the first time in her life, Eleanor felt something colder than sadness. It wasn't anger yet. It was the prelude to it. That evening, as twilight folded over Lakeview, her phone buzzed. Mr. Howard, her neighbor, texted, "Saw that fancy lady again, Savannah. She brought a man with a briefcase. They were measuring your balcony. When I called out, they left in a hurry." The trap was already set. The slap at the wedding, she realized, wasn't spontaneous. It was the final push in a campaign months in the making, a plan to make her look unstable, unfit to manage her affairs. They wanted to humiliate her into compliance. But Savannah had underestimated the woman she thought was fragile. When Daniel Carter arrived at the parking lot that night, his car lights carved long shadows across the asphalt. He stepped out, briefcase in hand, the chill of certainty in his eyes. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "these are the documents. Once we go through with this, you can't undo it." Eleanor looked past him, toward the glowing ballroom where Savannah laughed among her guests, drunk on victory. "Undo it," she whispered. "No, Daniel. Tonight, we begin." She flipped open the briefcase. Immediate suspension of all transfers to Michael Wells. Termination of lease guarantees. Revocation of the ballroom payment. Amendment of her will. Transferring her entire estate to the Wells Foundation for senior protection. The papers fluttered in the wind, like wings about to take flight. Daniel hesitated. "You'll lose them both." Eleanor's gaze was steady. "I already did." She signed. In that moment, something inside her settled. Not revenge, not rage, but clarity. For years she had played the quiet, harmless widow. That mask had served its purpose. Now it was time for the world, for Savannah, for her son, to meet the woman behind it. The poison had been poured carefully, drop by drop. But tonight, the antidote had a name: justice. The music stopped mid-note when the ballroom doors swung open again. The chatter dissolved. Eleanor Wells stepped through the archway, framed by the glow of chandeliers, her posture calm, almost regal. Beside her walked Daniel Carter, his leather briefcase clasped tight, his expression as unreadable as a judge's. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Savannah Blake, radiant in her designer gown, let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, you came back? I thought the drama was over." Eleanor's voice carried, low and steady. "No, Savannah. The drama hasn't even started." Daniel took one step forward, clearing his throat. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm Mrs. Wells's financial and legal advisor. I'm afraid I must interrupt this celebration for a matter of urgent business concerning the couple." A murmur rolled through the crowd. Phone cameras lifted, lenses gleaming like curious eyes. Savannah's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor moved closer, her heels ticking softly against the marble. "You wanted my apartment, my space, my silence. But before you take what's mine, you should know what it really costs." Daniel opened his briefcase, unfolding a set of official documents. "Item 1, he began crisply. "Effective immediately. All monthly transfers from Mrs. Wells to Mr. Michael Wells are terminated. Total amount transferred over the last 36 months, $162,000. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Guests craned their necks. A man dropped his champagne flute. Savannah blinked, confusion giving way to dread. "What are you saying?" Eleanor's tone didn't waver. "For 3 years, every bill, every rent payment, every dinner you bragged about, I paid for them. While you mocked me for working in a flower shop, I was keeping your lives afloat." Daniel continued, unflinching. "Item 2. The lease guarantee for the couple's residence is revoked, effective tomorrow morning. Item 3. The financial guarantee for this very event, $53,000, has also been withdrawn. The management will be informed immediately." The silence that followed was almost holy. Mr. Martinez, the ballroom manager, appeared at the edge of the crowd, his expression tightening as he checked his phone. Savannah clutched Michael's arm. "She's bluffing. She doesn't have that kind of money. Look at her." Eleanor turned toward her, her eyes clear, her voice cutting through the noise. "Appearances deceive, Savannah. You of all people should know that." Daniel lifted one final page. Item 4. Mrs. Wells's last will and testament has been amended. All previous inheritances designated for Mr. Wells are officially redirected to the Wells Foundation for Senior Protection, a charity created to prevent financial abuse of the elderly. It was as if the chandeliers dimmed. Michael staggered backward, face pale. "Mom, what are you doing?" What I should have done long ago, Eleanor replied, teaching you that love doesn't mean exploitation. Savannah's composure snapped. You can't do this. We're family. Eleanor faced her squarely. Family doesn't slap their elders on their wedding night. Family doesn't plan to steal their home. You mistook kindness for weakness. That mistake ends here. The ballroom manager stepped forward now, voice firm. Mr. Wells, Mrs. Blake, unless an alternative payment is arranged, the event will be suspended immediately. Gasps spread through the guests. Savannah spun toward Michael, frantic. Do something. Fix this. He looked at his mother, tears forming, guilt creeping up his throat. Mom, please, not like this. We can talk. Eleanor took a long, quiet breath. I talked for years. You just never listened. From the corner of the room, Mr. Howard, her elderly neighbor, watched with quiet pride. Around him, phones captured every second. Eleanor's steady stance, Savannah's unraveling composure, Michael's collapse. The story that began as a humiliation was transforming into something else entirely, a reckoning. Daniel closed his briefcase. All actions are legally binding, he announced. Effective now. Eleanor turned toward the crowd. I came here tonight as a mother, she said, but I'm leaving as a woman who refuses to be silenced. She paused at the door, letting the moment settle. The air smelled of wilted roses and cold champagne. Guests whispered her name like a prayer or a warning. Then she said it, the line that would echo across every phone, every headline by morning. You mistook kindness for weakness. That mistake just cost you everything. And with that, Eleanor Wells walked out of her son's wedding, her head high, while the life she'd built in silence finally spoke for itself. 3 days later, the morning light over Lakeview was silver and still, as if the world itself was holding its breath after the storm. The news had already spread. The video of the wedding incident, as the tabloids politely called it, had gone viral overnight. 1 million strangers had watched Savannah Blake's hand slice through the air, and Eleanor Wells' calm, deliberate revenge unfold. The internet called her the Iron Widow of Willow Creek. Inside her apartment, Eleanor sat by the window, a cup of tea cooling in her hands. Mr. Howard, her neighbor, stood in the doorway holding a brown paper bag. Fresh cinnamon rolls, he said, smiling shyly. You looked like you needed something sweet. Eleanor smiled faintly. After all that bitterness, maybe I do. Her phone buzzed for the 100th time that morning. Texts, emails, calls from journalists, talk shows, and even old friends who hadn't spoken to her in years. Among them were 17 missed calls from Michael and 1 long email from Savannah. Subject line, you ruined everything. Eleanor didn't open it. Daniel Carter called at noon. They're in deep trouble, he said matter-of-factly. The ballroom filed a lawsuit for breach of contract. The banks froze their accounts after Savannah tried to pull from your name. And that guardianship petition, dead in the water thanks to the video evidence. Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. It's done then. For now, Daniel replied. But the story's bigger than you think. A reporter from Prime Stories Live wants you on air tomorrow. She hesitated, staring out at the lake where the sunlight rippled like broken glass. Fine, she said at last, but I won't go to sell a scandal. I'll go to tell the truth. The studio was bright, the lights hot. Across from her sat Catherine Reed, the kind of journalist who could make the truth sound like poetry. Cameras rolled. Catherine, Eleanor began, her voice steady. Kindness is not a blank check. It comes with boundaries. I let mine blur, and people I loved used that blur to take advantage of me. But I'm not the only one. Across this country, thousands of seniors are being silenced, drained, erased by the very families they raised. Her words landed like quiet thunder. Online comments flooded in, stories from others who had been manipulated, shamed, or stripped of their independence. The episode hit a nerve. By the next morning, Eleanor's message had become a movement. She acted quickly. With Daniel's help, she finalized the paperwork for the Wells Foundation for Senior Protection, a non-profit dedicated to defending elderly citizens from financial and emotional exploitation. Carmen Alvarez, a passionate advocate, joined as director. Mr. Howard became its first community ambassador. That same week, Eleanor met with a local council to propose a policy, the Elder Shield Act, a system that allowed immediate freezing of financial transactions when coercion was suspected. The room erupted in applause when she finished her presentation. Someone whispered, her husband would be proud. That night, back at Lakeview, her phone rang again. It was Michael. She almost didn't answer, but something inside her, still maternal despite everything, did. His voice was small. Mom, I don't know what to say. Savannah's gone. We lost everything. I messed up. Eleanor was silent for a long moment. You didn't lose everything, Michael, she said gently. You lost the illusion. There's a difference. He choked on a sob. She's pregnant. Eleanor's breath caught, but she didn't flinch. Then you have a chance to do it right this time, she said. Be the father your child can respect, not the son I had to forgive. The line went quiet. Then a whisper. Do you still love me? I do, she said softly. But love isn't a wallet, Michael. It's a compass. It shows you where home is, but you still have to walk back. When the call ended, she sat for a long time, staring at the horizon. The lake shimmered gold under the setting sun, the same color as the light that had once filled her wedding photo with Robert. She placed that photo on the table beside the foundation's first brochure. 2 chapters of her life, past and present, finally aligned. As night fell, Eleanor stepped onto her balcony, the cool air brushing her skin. Below, Lakeview was alive again. Children's laughter, the faint strum of a guitar from a nearby porch, the scent of blooming jasmine. She whispered to herself, justice isn't loud. It's steady. For the first time in years, she felt peace, real peace. The kind that doesn't demand silence, but rewards courage. Somewhere across the city, a young man named Michael Wells held his phone and stared at her picture. And though he didn't say it out loud, he finally understood. And in the quiet light over Lakeview, the woman once humiliated in a ballroom stood reborn, not as a victim, not as a widow, but as a symbol of what happens when kindness finally learns to draw a line.